Shabbat Shalom. If I were to ask you to describe yourself using 3 adjectives, I wonder which adjectives you would choose. Now, I know some might say something like short, balding, nearsighted, middle-aged man. Just for example. That's 4, right? Thank you for those of you paying attention. I could have left out the middle-aged part. And pretty much everybody would agree. But if I were to really ask you 3 adjectives that describe who you are, how you see yourself, I wonder which adjectives you would choose. And as you think about that for a second, those 3 adjectives that you would really use to describe yourself, I wonder if I then asked your spouse, would they agree with those 3 adjectives? Would they be the first 3 adjectives that your spouse would come up with? What if we asked your best friend about those 3 adjectives? Would they agree? What if we took a survey of 100 of your friends, much like the Family Feud, and said, if you were going to describe this person with 3 adjectives, which 3 would they be? I wonder if we would achieve consensus. 3 adjectives that describe who you really are. I've been thinking a lot about perspectives, really for these last many years. About how we see ourselves, about how we see our people, and about how others see ourselves, about how others see our people, how others see the state of Israel. There's a story about 2 men, one on either side of a really large river, and one calls out to the other one, "Hey, do you know how I can get to the other side?" And the other guy yells back, "You're already on the other side." Perspectives matter. And certainly over the last several years, as we've been watching the radicalization of DEI and how people see the Jews, I've been thinking about perspectives. And since October 7th, and certainly all the way up to this last week of the war with Iran, I've been thinking a lot about how others perceive the Jews. Now, the truth is, the vast majority of the world has never met a Jew. And so what they know about the Jews is either what they watch on CNN Europe or Al Jazeera. And I know this is a surprise, but we don't look particularly good on CNN Europe or Al Jazeera. Here in North America, in the United States in particular, we think about how our Christian neighbors might view the Jews and might view Israel. What does it mean for those who grew up with the idea of one of the highest commandments is to turn the other cheek? It's not a Jewish notion, but it's very much a Christian notion. How then do they see us? When you think about people who grew up Muslim, perhaps in Dearborn, perhaps around this country, what do they see? What do they know when they think about the Jewish people? And that's not even to talk about the evangelicals and how they understand the Jews and Israel. And that's certainly not to talk about the radical Islamists and what they say and think about the Jews. I once heard a wonderful speaker when I was a student at the University of Michigan. He was an Israeli ambassador talking about negotiations and perceptions and how perceptions play into the negotiations. And what he said to me really stuck. He said, in any sort of negotiation, you want to be perceived as David against the other person as Goliath. In any situation, you want to be perceived as the little David taking on the mighty Goliath. Now, that's certainly how we Jews have seen ourselves over these last many years. We are the David taking on the mighty Goliath of the Arab world, whereas many in the Arab world perceive Israel as the tip of the spear of the Western world, particularly Christianity. And they see themselves, in particular the radical Islamists, as countering the great Satan, which is the United States and our Western thinking, along with the little Satan, which is Israel, a representative of the greater Satan. I think a lot about perceptions. And what does it mean? Now, many of us, we get to a certain age in life, and we come to say, you know what? I don't care how others see me. I want to ask you, which of you have gotten to that age? And there are still others who say, I don't care what I say because I don't care what others hear from me. I know that many of you have gotten to that stage. And in general, it's true. We don't really need to care what others think about us until we need something from them. We don't care about what others think about us until we need something from them. And then we need to know whether they perceive us as vulnerable or do they perceive us as aggressive? Do they perceive us as strong or do they perceive us as weak? And what then are the implications? Perception matters. I remember early on, after October 7th, I was hearing from my teacher, Micha Goodman of the Shalom Hartman Institute. And Micha said something that really stuck with me. He said that for Israel, and probably for the Jewish people as a whole, we want to be loved by the West, but feared in the Middle East. What is the perception we want of others as Israel, as the Jews? We want to be loved by those in the West. We want to be feared by the people in the Middle East. And then Micha added, but what we need to do in order to be loved by the predominantly Christian West is not the same thing that we need to do to be feared by the predominantly Muslim Middle East. And in fact, what we might do to achieve one actually comes to contradict the other. And we're stuck, we Jews, the people of Israel, are stuck in this tension of perception. As we turn to our Torah portion this week, Parshat Shalach Lecha, we see the power of perception. As we know, Moses is trying to prepare the Israelites, recently freed from slavery in Egypt, to enter and to reclaim the promised land. And so Moses says something very specific. He says to the 12 leaders of our ancestors, go out and scout the land and bring me back a report. What is the land like? How many soldiers exist in the land? What are we going to need to do militarily in order to reclaim the promised land? Moses is looking for very specific facts that he'll need as the general of the Jewish people in order to lead us to victory and to reclaim our ancestral homeland. The 12 scouts go out and they scout the land. They return to Moses. 2 of the scouts, in particular Caleb and Joshua, they say if we have faith in God, then we can reclaim the promised land. 10 of the scouts, the other 10, disagree. And they give a very interesting report back. Those 10 scouts say, we are like grasshoppers in our own eyes. Imagine what we must look like to the people then living in the land of Israel. They say we are like grasshoppers in our own eyes. Imagine what we must look like to the people then living in the land. And as a result of their lies, as a result of their faithlessness, God condemns the Israelites to wander for 38 more years in the wilderness for a total of 40, so that only a new generation can go to battle to reclaim the promised land. God saw their faithlessness and said, these are not the right people to lead us to reclaim the land of Israel. Now, what's interesting as I was thinking about it this week and studying it, you all know that I'm particularly biased toward the 2 scouts who returned with the positive report. All right, I'm particularly biased toward one whose name is Caleb, the same name as our firstborn child. I like these guys. But the truth is, Moses sent the 12 scouts out to come back with the military report of facts and information, and the 12 leaders came back with opinion. Could you imagine a bunch of Jews coming back with opinion? And that's what happened. And that's what led ultimately to our ancestors having to wander for 38 more years and that entire generation needing to die out. What ultimately led to that was that they lacked faith in themselves and they lacked faith in God. And what we come to see from this story is that perhaps even more important than how others perceive us, and it matters how others perceive us, what matters even more than that is how we perceive ourselves. If we perceive ourselves as strong, then we can be strong. If we see ourselves as smart, then we can be smart. If we see ourselves as kind and generous, then we're going to be kind and generous. How we perceive ourselves leads to the actions that we take, which come back to reinforce how we then perceive ourselves. So let me ask you then this question. If I were to ask you 3 adjectives to describe the Jewish people today, what 3 adjectives would you use? I'll open it up. 3 adjectives to describe the Jewish people today. Resilient. Resilient. All right, we like that one. Courageous. Confident. Strong. Tenacious. Self-reliant. Stubborn. Generous. Principled. Hated. Kind-hearted. Anyone else? Moral. Would you use that word? Faithful. A rebuttal. Pragmatic. But not faithful. I wonder what it means that these are all the adjectives that we would use to describe ourselves. And are we using them because we're so Zionist that we're speaking about it from a Zionist point of view rather than the point of view of North American Jewry? That's interesting. I wonder if I said specifically what are 3 adjectives you'd use to describe North American Jewry, if we would give out all of those same adjectives. So let me say a couple of things then toward our conclusion. One is I want to invite everyone after Shabbat to order this book called To Be a Jew Today. I'm going to lead a book club conversation on it a month from now. It'll be on Zoom. It's very accessible. And I invite everyone to participate. If you order it after Shabbat, you'll have a month to read about it. And we can talk about what the author, Noah Feldman, might think that it means to be a Jew today. But I might invite us also, in this week of war, in this week of anxiety, in this week of incredible success, how we might view the Jewish people, how we ourselves might view the Jewish people. And then might I remind us that each and every one of us is a representative to the broader world, to our neighbors, to our friends, to our coworkers, to our community, of who a Jew is. And I might think what you want the 3 adjectives to be used to describe the Jewish people, and go out and behave in such a way that those adjectives, hopefully positive ones, come to fruition. And I might also invite you, as you think about those 3 adjectives you use to describe yourself, to make sure they are positive adjectives. Because you've blessed me by letting me into the journey of your life. And when I look around, I see people, individuals, who are incredibly strong, who are profoundly wise, who are kind beyond all kindness, who give deeply of themselves to others, who are truly good and moral and decent, caring people who want only what's best for the Jews and for all humanity. This Shabbat of Parashat Shalach Lecha, let us remind ourselves that perceptions matter. But even more than the perceptions that others have of us, the perceptions of what we have of ourselves is what matters most. May we not only choose to perceive ourselves as positive, but may we go out and live in such a way that others see us in that positive light as well. So on this Shabbat, I pray, Adonai oz li'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. May God bless us, the Jewish people, and Israel with all the different forms of strength. And in that way, too, may God bless each and every one of us and our brothers and sisters in Israel with peace. And let us say together, Amen.